I have a couple of quick cards to show you today, and these have really come about because of my passion for 8x8 cards. When you've covered an 8x8 card, you end up with a bit of the background paper left over, and particularly these trees I think are really pretty. So I've combined them with some background paper, and I think they make quite a pretty card on their own, and it saves wasting the bit of paper. Here's another one, using a slightly smaller one. I love the fluffy effect of the mulberry paper as well. And then another. So all quite similar, but again using background paper from our background packs, A5 plus packs, and this is just an offcut of background paper for this one. So that's what we'll be working on today. So what we're going to need, this is our PKBPs, which are background papers, and they come in a range of different colours in a pack. This is the one I've been using, which is our deep and dark. The card I've been using is a 6" by 8" or 150 by 205 size, which is almost A5, but I prefer the proportions of this one. Then a scrap of either card or background paper. This one's from an actual 7x7 card that I used, so I've got a little more width than I normally have for this. And then you'll need some mulberry paper to make the nice fluffy snow. Glue stick can be quite handy, and a paintbrush and water, really. So to start, this is the paper we're going to use. Because it's paper, I like to mount it onto scrap white card. I prefer to work with card for this because it's got a little more body to it, and some of my panels are raised. So we'll glue that to there. You could use Yoo-hoo or double-sided tape if you prefer. But for simplicity, I'm going for the glue stick. I'm going to trim this afterwards because it's a bit rough at the bottom. And I am going to raise it up a bit because I don't really want lots of sky, or it'll be too tight to the card, bottom of the card. So we'll give that a bit of a press. Now I'll pop that under something heavy for a bit. For the cards I've already made, I've left a little white border. For this one, I'm going to go up to the cover it completely. Again, we're going right up to the edge. The beauty of these A5 plus packs is you can actually cover a whole A5 and you've got a little bit of trim. If it was exactly A5 and your card wasn't, then you wouldn't be able to cover it completely. So you've got a little extra, a few millimetres on it to just allow you to do that. Next, our panels have fluffy edges, so to do that, mulberry paper tears, but if you make it wet first, it pulls away with a lovely fluffy edge. So I've just got water in a jar and a paintbrush, and we're just going to take a damp line down. Doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be a certain thickness or anything. And then I'm going to do this at leaving a gap of approximately an inch, inch and a half. I'm going to do the whole sheet, even though I might not need the whole sheet. We can save the strips just as easily as the full sheet. Then starting with the one we did first, if we hold the sheet down and just pull a little away, you'll see it's a bit hard because it's white on white. And as you can see, you end up with these lovely fluffy edges, and they look gorgeous. So I'll just pop those onto the cutting mat and they can finish drying. Try not to pull out where you get these long bits. I leave them trailing out because they add extra. You can always adjust them once you use it, but if you pull them out now, it takes something away from the finished effect. That one went a bit wide. I've made that one a little bit too wet as well, but it will still work if we just have to pull it carefully. There we go. So there's our board full of strips, and they'll dry off and we can use them one by one. Now we're going back to our main image. Our card is actually 205 by 150. 200 is from here to here on the cutting mat. We want to make it a little smaller, so I'm going to begin by trimming the top edge, and I'll trim that to the card edge. And then the bottom edge. If I start on that line, then 4 of these lines will make 200, so that's 200. And I want to come up a little bit, so 15mm is probably a good amount, and it's not too close to the bottom of the trees. There's no definite size or shape or position you need to be. We want to go a bit narrow on the width because we want a bit of the blue to show around, and we want to get the fluffy texture around the edge as well. The card is 150, which is to here, so I might just come in a little. So I've paper punched a hole. I'm going to make a moon out of this. Just check it on the card. I think that'll be fine. I have some Sublime glitter here. It's a lovely, gorgeously glossy paper. It's got a lovely sparkle, and I'll just fit that behind. Because it's plastic, I like to use double-sided tape to hold it in place. I've put a couple of bars on already. So that's simply paper punched. I could stick it on top and paper punch the glitter, but I actually like it set back. I'm not quite sure what difference it makes, but it looks quite nice to me. Make sure we put the right side facing. There we go, a nice glimmery moon in the corner now. Now we go to our mulberry paper strips. We're going to put the mulberry paper just fluffing out from the edge. So we'll start with the strip of double-sided and a piece of our mulberry paper. I want one that's got the 2 edges fluffed. Now we can use one piece of this, but I feel that when you put that onto the card, it's not got a lovely depth, and I like mine stronger and whiter. So I tend to take my one with 2 fluffed edges, and if you fold it in half, it will show better on the cutting mat, sorry. You end up with double the fluff and a nice thick white look to it. And then we're going to place it just sticking out from the edge of the card, the panel. So you can see, instead of one layer, the 2 layers, that's how one layer would look, and the 2 layers just has a more depth of white. It looks nicer. And for this, I would tear it. We want to keep the fluffy going, not straight neat edges at this stage. and then we're going to do another one at the top. We go straight over the glitter that we put there. Now I will use the other end of this because there's nothing wrong with it. Because it's soft and fluffy, this can join really easily and it doesn't notice. So we'll do a fluffy edge there. Then we'll take another strip and fold it in half. So now we want to add a piece to the end here. And you can't even tell that it was joined, it just looks like a continuous strip. You'll notice I did two sides, not all around with the double-sided tape. That's because now we're going to take the tape over the edge of the mulberry that we have there, and then we get a continuous line up to the corner. I don't like the straight bit in the corner. I'd prefer to have that as a join than the corner. So I'll turn it over. It doesn't really mind that you've got a double bit there, but you can pull off a little bit like that. That was the straight bottom edge, and that just takes out the little straight line that was there. Then another strip, fold in half. If you find you've got these bits and you feel that they're too deep, you can pull a little bit off by hand like this. I save these fluffy bits when I'm working, obviously not if I'm not working on projects, but if I'm working on them, I save those and I'll show you later what you can do with those. Just keep a little pile to one side, overlap there and tear the corner. I'm going to add a little glue to that because it pulled and not stuck nicely. Stick glue with mulberry paper doesn't notice when it dries, so I love to use a stick glue for this. There we go. Now those little bits that we pulled off, if we think that corner's a bit empty, we can add that in, and I do feel that. So use the stick glue, stick that to it so you've got some glue onto the mulberry, and then just pop it behind, and you've filled out the corner and nobody knows it was a bit thin. And then we have a last edge. I quite like these long pieces trailing out. If you wanted to, you could trim them off a little bit, but I quite like that soft and fluffiness. For most of these I've gone, now I'm putting the double-sided tape along the join of the mulberry, the fold of the mulberry paper, so it's part on the mulberry paper and part on the card. That should help to hold the mulberry in place. If it went just on the mulberry, it could twist and turn, but because it's on the card too, it should hold it firmly onto the main card. think I'm going to go over and leave a little extra on the side rather than central, and then I can add some peel off snowflakes or stars or anything I like down the edge. The moon, like it is, looks nice, but we could make some clouds across the moon. I've got a piece of the mulberry paper, and if you pull it away, you can pull away little drifty bits like that. Mostly it's pulling it into shape so that it's not too dense, and we can do little snowy drifts across the moon like that. So a bit of glue onto there. Oops, I've left that nice tail on the glue. This is the reason I save all those tiny little bits when I'm actually working on something, because if you want to embellish, it works really quite nicely for that job. Your fingers do get a bit sticky, but they're washable. That trailed out nicely, but it didn't stick well. And then with these little wispy bits, like this, we can do a similar thing to the trees. If we put a little glue on it, you can actually stick little bits onto the tree, soft fluffy snowflakes. And by doing that you can actually pick out this tree and leave that tree, almost highlight the tree. And we don't want it to stick down too much. We want a nice fluffy, almost like it's only just landed there. It doesn't notice very much, but it just gives it a little something extra. I'm not even sure it's going to show up in the video very well, but in real life it looks quite nice. Well, I like it. And that nice trail. Because they've stuck to your finger, they pull off the sheet nicer. And really it's stop when you think you've done enough. I'll twist it and hope that you can see. Hopefully all this fluffing up shows. And the little bit across the moon, I think that looks quite sweet. Because we've got the sublime moon, we have a sublime ribbon, which is the same, and I think that will look nice down the edge. This doesn't tie all that well, so I'm going to stick it on, but I'm going to have to cut my double-sided tape in half. It's just a bit too wide. Doesn't have to be overly neat. Generally when I do this, I'll wrap this back around the tape reel to use another time, unless I'm using it on something straight away. It's important not to press it too firmly onto your cutting mat or you may not get it off. And underneath the fluffy bit, I undo this from the centre, and then we can poke all the excess back into it. If you put your card square onto the cutting mat, you can use the grid line to try and get your ribbon straight, except for when it moves like that. We could add a bow, but actually I quite like it with just the band. If you fancy a bow, by all means. I have a peel off here. This is number 752. Really any peel off will do, but I quite like the hickledy-picklediness of this one. I don't like to yank peel-offs from the end. I like to lift it a bit through, partly because you can tear them and partly because they then bend out of shape and you've got to get them back into shape before you can think about putting them in place. So because it's a bit of a hickledy-pickledy type, we don't have to get it overly straight. It's not a big deal. I'll move that one. If you don't press them down firmly to start with, they're quite easy to lift up. And then when you're happy with how they're going, you can then press them firmly and they should stay. I was half wondering about a star. Or a little cluster. There we are. So there we are, the finished card. Quite quick to make and simple, but looks very effective. Or I like it anyway. Hope you do.